Welcome to In the Ven Zone with Christine McKay, where we get candid about what it takes to negotiate effectively. You'll learn from the challenges and successes of entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. We help you change the nature of your negotiations and get more from every deal you do.
Hello, and welcome to another amazing episode of In the Ven Zone. Today, I am so excited to bring to you one of my mentors, Kevin Thompson. Now, Kevin and I have not known each other for very long, but he is an amazing force to be reckoned with when it comes to networking and building relationships. Kevin creates his focus is creating a positive change on a global scale, and he does that by facilitating connections between increasingly influential people. He's been the trusted connector for high-level entrepreneurs for over a decade, and the introductions he's made have been worth millions of dollars. Because he's close friends with so many influential entrepreneurs and business owners and professionals, he is able to cut through all the red tape, eliminate rejection, and guarantee you a red carpet reception for your ideas and your proposals. Whether you're looking for trusted connections that will allow you to take advantage of your biggest opportunities or solve for your biggest business challenges, Kevin is your go-to guy. And one of the reasons that I'm super excited about having Kevin here with us on In the Ven Zone is because Kevin, in my short time of knowing him, has some very amazing negotiation philosophies. And one of them is focused around the topic of renegotiation. So for those of you who have seen me speak, the topic of renegotiation is actually a big deal for us on In the Ven Zone and at Ven Negotiation. But the other thing that's really amazing about Kevin is he's built a multi-million-dollar business out of using informal contracts to manage partnerships. So you'll have lots of attorneys sitting, rolling over in their graves and throwing things at the screen right now if they're watching, going, what the heck do you mean you're doing partnerships without contracts in place? So it's really important to understand that there are two kinds of contracts: formal, which your lawyers are writing, and informal. And I guarantee you that there are informal contracts that Kevin uses without using the legal instrument of a formalized contract. So we are going to be talking about that and hearing his stories and the great things that he's experienced and maybe some of the not so great things that he's experienced and lessons he's learned as he has built a very successful business doing amazing partnerships all over the world. Kevin, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So honored to have you here.
Oh man, this is my pleasure, Christine. And honestly, until you reached out to me and said, hey, I would love to talk with you about this. Honestly, I had not even given that much thought to how I've been doing what I do. I've just been doing my thing. But I will tell you that the comment you made about attorneys, I have really close attorney friends who they have oh, Kevin. But even at that, I still haven't been doing any written contracts.
I think the thing that I admire about how you've built your business is that you've built it on the proverbial, handshake, right? It's that your word is your bond. But because I think so what the audience should know is that how I met Kevin. Kevin is the CEO and the co-founder of a program called Tribe for Leaders. And we're going to put the contact information in the show notes, because Tribe for Leaders, why don't you explain a little bit about what Tribe for Leaders is, and then I'll explain how I got introduced to you.
Okay. So Tribe for Leaders is a community of established entrepreneurs who have years of experience, of expertise, of resources, of connections, who on the other side of the coin, they are also some of the most giving, generous, lead with a helping hand people of integrity on the planet. And my partner, Jules, is kind of, without her, Tribe for Leaders would have never even been born. But she just saw things that I didn't see, kind of like you. You notice things in people that they might not notice for themselves. And she definitely saw in me some things I didn't see for myself. And she's like, Kevin, you have this amazing way of doing business and attracting people to you. And instead of running a typical mastermind group where people invest whatever, 25, 50,000 a year to be a part of it, she goes, what if you gave them the opportunity to invest less on the front end and just let them share in the revenue that gets created and have that be the benchmark? Let that be the benchmark and the focus of creating results for the members. And when you do, they'll just want to share with you because that's who you are. You're this giving person, and they're just going to want to give back to you. And so that's how Tribe for Leaders was born. And I look at what we have accomplished and who we have attracted to this community. And I'm just like, wow, look at these amazing people. It's been such an honor.
Yeah, it's a remarkable group. And I am a member of Tribe for Leaders. And that's how I met Kevin, was the venerable and amazing Patty Lawrence introduced me to you guys. And just, I am blown away by the quality of people. And what you say about the giving is just like, it is amazing. And we've got people who've written books, and like one of the members who just recently wrote a book, his book is like sold out. I was like, I pre-ordered and I can't get it for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, it's just an amazing support system. It's such a phenomenal group. And part of what struck me when you and I and Jules first had our conversation was this conversation about what this revenue sharing component would look like and how that would look. And you had said in that meeting, you were like, well, if this is what we think will work, that's awesome. This is good. We'll do it this way. And then we'll kind of keep in touch and touch base frequently and say, if it doesn't work, then we'll renegotiate it and figure out a different way of doing it. And that like blew my brain, because as we've talked about before, renegotiation is something that's super important to me. I feel that negotiation is a relationship that my attorney friends laugh at me when I say that, a contract, whether it's formal or informal, is a document of hope. It is about the hope that we will have a better future together than we would not with each other. And so it is about that promise of the future that is what drives the negotiation to begin with. And so when you think about it from that perspective, and I talk about it in terms of my husband and I know you've been married and you're married and have family and you've got kids and grandkids even, I think. And so, we've seen relationships change and morph over time. And my husband and I have been married 27 years. And it's like the deal that we entered into when we first got married is not entirely the same as it is today. And so, but yeah, in business, we often enter into relationships, and for whatever reason, we assume that those are going to be the same thing. The deal that I had before is the same deal I'm going to have in 10, 15, 20 years. And I've negotiated contracts that are 20 years old that have just been pseudo amendment after pseudo amendment and throw some paper here, but not really a reevaluation of, is this relationship still working for us? Is it still working for both of us? Is there mutual benefit? Does that still exist? And is this a fair, not necessarily equitable, but is this now still a fair distribution of value amongst the people involved in the negotiation to begin with? So tell us a little bit at how you kind of decided to avoid using contracts in your relationships, in your partnering. How did you come to that decision?
Well, from the very first strategic partnership I did, which was in 2003, it was with a close friend of mine who he put on these seminars for the carpet cleaning and restoration industry. In fact, that's how I met him, because I used to be in that industry. I was a client of his. Oh, wow. And throughout our relationship, one of the things that I had done in my business was I added a website component to it. Mm-hmm. And when we did that over a couple of years, that website component alone was producing an extra $12,000 to $13,000 a month for our company. And in early 2003, he was like, Kevin, he's like, why don't you come down to the annual event in October and show everybody what you're doing with your website? Because I think they would get a ton of value from that. And I was like, all right, that sounds good. And he's like, before you come, he's like, make sure and document what you do and how you do it, put it into a system that you can offer these people, because there's going to be people in the audience that once they hear from you, they're going to want your help, and just make sure you're ready to give that to those people. And so I did that, and it took me several months to put that together, but come October, I was ready to go. And I didn't even know how this stuff worked. And so I had to call Joe's assistant, and I told her, I said, I'm getting ready to come down and speak at the event next week. And Joe, he asked me to put this system together and make it available, and I've got it ready to go, but I don't even know how this works. And she said, well, Kevin, the way that Joe usually does it is anytime he has somebody speaking who's going to be offering a resource, he usually just does a 50-50 split with that presenter. And because he's gone to the effort and invested the time and the money and the resources to be able to get the audience there, I'm like, oh, okay, sounds great. And so I spoke at that event. We made $35,000 in sales of that training that I'd done. And I was just like, wow, how cool was that? And I did a 50-50 split on that with Joe. And like at the time, I didn't even like I said, that was my very first strategic partnership. I didn't even realize enough to know to call it a strategic partnership at that time. It was just two guys having a conversation that he was like, Kevin, and there was no conversation about, oh, if we do this, we'll make all this money, we'll make a killing, there was no talk like that. All it was he was like, Kevin, you have something of value to offer, and the people who come here, they will really appreciate that. And to Joe, it wouldn't have mattered how much money. I mean, Joe doesn't need my help making money. He already has a successful business. For him, what it was about was furthering the relationship with his people. That's what it was about. And no amount of money he wouldn't have put that relationship with those people at risk for any amount of money. And so, and we did that with no contract. It was just two guys who I had immense respect for him because he'd already helped me in my business. And I was quite honestly flattered that he would say, come and share with all these people. And so I wanted to do right by him. And I know he felt the same exact way. And, that was my first experience. And I was like, wow, I want to do a whole lot more of this. And so that's what kind of kicked things off. And no contract, no nothing, just two guys who respected each other and wanted to do something cool together.
Well, you hit on a word that actually I think is really critical in terms of how you've built your business, and that is respect. And I talk a lot about, and one of the things that we've done at Venn Negotiation is we've taken some research that was originated out of Cornell around negotiation styles. And we've kind of put our own spin on the names of them. And, a lot of people, when they talk about negotiation, they talk about it in terms of this combative kind of thing where they get defensive, and it's a battle. And there's a negotiation style for whom negotiation is in fact a battle, and they see it as something to conquer, and they go into it armed and armored, and they don't often have respect for their counterparts. And I think that's one of the amazing things. I mean, you just ooze respect of the people. I mean, certainly in my interactions with you at TFL, at Tribe for Leaders, you have so much respect for everybody in the group. And I think that makes your level of respect and how you build that is one of the things that makes it easier for you to do business the way that you do it. Because if somebody had that champion style personality or negotiation style where they didn't have that transfer of respect, then I think that becomes a lot harder. Have you seen where that kind of situation has come into play?
I have experienced that firsthand on several occasions where people go into a negotiation with, like you just said, with it's a conquer thing that their thought process is, is that in order for me to win the negotiation, it means I have to get the upper hand. I have to get the better end of the stick or what have you. And the big challenge with that, and especially where I come from. So like, Joe, I met him in 1997. And like, so we go back, my gosh, that's 23 years now that him and I have been friends. And so much has come from that one relationship in my life for both of us. Mm-hmm. And if I would have looked at Joe or anybody else for that matter, and when you're negotiating and your whole thought process is like, well, in order for me to win, I have to get the upper hand. As soon as somebody feels like they're getting the short end of the stick, well, now that relationship starts to deteriorate. Mm-hmm. And if they don't feel that they can talk about that, if they don't feel they are open to share, like, hey, this just isn't working, then they won't share. And now that relationship deteriorates, it starts to break down. And before you know it, there is no more relationship. Mm-hmm. And I've always been from the point of like, I want to have long-term, mutually rewarding relationships where both people are happy, so that, because once you open that door and you start the first relationship, well, who knows what's going to come from there? But after years of doing this, I can tell you a whole lot comes. And I've had so many more rewarding relationships in my life and so many more strategic partnerships because the lines of communication are open and we're both parties are wanting to make it a win for the other.
Mm-hmm. So you hit on something else that's really important, is around lines of communication, right? And that being open. How have you found, what are some of the things that you've been able to use to actually keep those communication lines open? Because that's a challenge for a lot of people.
Sure. I just like, when I think about some of the longest term relationships and the most profitable and the most rewarding relationships, I got this friend of mine, Jesse, that I met him in 2012, and we started working together, and he was the one that, really at first, when we started working together on this one project, he was the one that said to me, because he was like, okay, Kevin, here's how I propose that we do this. I'm going to help you grow this piece of your business, and we'll make that our focus over the next couple of years here. But instead of me charging you a monthly consulting rate, what I would like to do is I would like to just have 25% of the additional revenue that we create together through our efforts. And what we'll do is we'll look at where this portion of your business has been over the last year. So we'll get a 12-month benchmark of where you are. And so that's where we'll start. And then anything that we create revenue over and above that, then that's what I would like to share in the revenue with you. And he's like, are you open to that? And I'm like, well, heck yeah, Jesse. I was like, why? Yeah. I mean, you're wanting 25% of any dollar you put into my pocket and you're not going to charge me anything up front? Yeah, I want in. And he's like, perfect. And then he was like, and if at any time, Kev, this isn't working for you, let me know so that we can revisit this conversation. And I'll tell you what, like you mentioned, that just struck me. It hit me so dang hard. I'm like, okay. And so I just was like, I'm going to start treating people the same way, because I know how that made me feel in that moment. Yep. And over the next couple of years, I sent him some pretty doggone nice monthly checks. and the thing is I was happy to do that because my revenue was increasing, my impact was increasing. And it finally got to the point where, we had moved on, and that relationship, it got to the point where we didn't need to have regular communication anymore, but yet the revenue continued to come in. Mm-hmm. And I continued to send him his monthly check, even though we weren't in regular communication at all anymore. Mm-hmm. And finally, at one point, he got a hold of me and he's like, Kev, he's like, you know what? He's like, you've been compensating me all this time. I think I've been paid enough for this. And he's like, you don't need to keep on sending me checks. I'm like, okay, fair enough. And so then he and I, we had a couple of year stretch where we weren't in communication at all. But then some other things came up in my life and in my business. And I was like, can we talk again? And I got some stuff I want to run by you. And like, we just picked up like right where we left off, and we started doing some more stuff together. And those relationships, when you create a relationship, you can have those breaks in those relationships, but because you had such a good experience together, they pick up right where they left off. And I, through Tribe for Leaders is a good example that because of the format of it, it puts me into regular communication with the people in my life that I really care about. And so not only is it benefiting them, it's benefiting me as well, because I'm taking such an active role in those relationships. And it's really cool that, I've done these strategic partnerships with people throughout my life. But when you're in people will say, well, Kevin, can't you just refer business to me even if I'm not in Tribe for Leaders? And I'm like, yeah, that would happen. When it comes up in conversations that I'm regularly involved in, and I'm thinking, I need to connect you with so-and-so because based on what you shared, they're the exact person you need to talk with. And sometimes we refer Tribe for Leaders members to people who are not in the community because that's the right person for them to talk with. But the people that I'm in regular communication with, they're just top of mind because you're in regular communication versus somebody who's not in the group. Yeah, they might get a referral here and there. They might get, something set up. But the people who are in regular communication with, that's where a lot more is going to happen because the focus is there. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, and we have a lot of different opportunities in Tribe for Leaders to connect with each other, and all of the different members have got all these other things going on. And I'm going to be interviewing Blair Dunkley in a little while. And I mean, he has his thing that he does every Tuesday night on Facebook Live. And I'm like, they're glued to everything he's saying because it's just, I've learned so much. And so, I think it's huge, that ability to stay top of mind. And how do you do that? And one of the ways to do that is being part of a group that fosters that creates that opportunity. And you get to dive deeper on people's businesses and what's working for them, what's not working for them. You both get to learn and be a student of what's worked for them, but you also get to be a teacher in terms of what's worked for you. And I think that is an incredible thing. And when you talk about your relationship with Joe and stuff, that's one of the things that I hear you talk about, is without actually saying those words, but that there was kind of a student-teacher relationship that worked both ways, that times that you're the teacher and then at other times you're the student. And I think negotiation is very much that way. And if you believe that negotiation is about relationship that has fiduciary responsibility attached to it, please do not get me wrong, because whenever I talk about negotiation, it's not about equality necessarily. It's not about dividing things in the middle. It's about finding a fair deal that works for both parties and creates mutual benefit. And when you have that teacher to student, that relationship aspect with your counterparts, you're able to do that much more effectively. Yeah. In my experience. And it sounds that's consistent with your experience as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
So when you enter into relationships like the one with Joe and the other ones you're talking about, and even with those of us at Tribe for Leaders, like, what are some of the things that you pay attention to that become kind of alarm bells for you to say this situation, this relationship might be going off the rails a little bit, and that you need to kind of circle the wagons? And sorry, I am from the West. I grew up on a ranch in Montana, so I do lose a lot of cowboy colloquials every once in a while. So, because I may live in Los Angeles, but you can't take the country out of the girl. So, what are some of the things that you look for as your relationships progress that may raise alarm bells? Because I am certain that some of our audience who also don't often, many small businesses don't use formalized contracts, but they're not necessarily in tune with observing what might be going on in a relationship and then correcting it for it fast enough.
Yeah. one of the things I look for, and one of the things we do, especially around Tribe for Leaders, is we host these small gatherings on Zoom. And we in the past we called them roundtables. Now, because we're getting so many referrals, we're getting people who all have been referred to Tribe for Leaders by existing members. And so now we're hosting these roundtables. We call them TFL preview events now, and we get 4 to 6 entrepreneurs on a Zoom call. And in one way, it's our way to give to the entrepreneurial community by getting these, people together and stuff. But it also allows us, Jules and I, to see how people show up. And I want to see people showing up, like I said, with, being of service, being of contribution, being of help, to other people, and contributing from their expertise and their knowledge to serve other people. That's what I really want to see. And when I see people showing up that way, that's a really good sign that there's somebody that I want to get to know better. Yeah. And whether they become a Tribe for Leaders member or not is irrelevant, but anybody who, is about contribution first, that's the sign of a real successful entrepreneur or a CEO, is when they're about contribution and helping and serving and having that servant's heart, if you will, because every successful entrepreneur that I've ever met, that's where they come from. And so that's what I'm always looking for. And we do vet it really heavily. And we absolutely turn people away, because one bad seed, one wrong fit person, it ruins the whole pot.
Absolutely.
And we don't want that person. Now, so far, fortunately, we've done really well. But if we were to just, have a misjudgment or what have you, we would have to rectify it. We would have to, get that person out of the group, because I'm not willing to risk everybody else for one bad person. I don't care how much, money they're willing to pay or anything. It doesn't matter, because it's the community as a whole that we've got to keep an eye out for. So.
And I appreciate that. because it's very, especially when we're all working in a virtual world right now, everybody's in 2 dimensions. And that's kind of my current saying. We're no longer working in a 3-dimensional world. We're working in a 2-dimensional world, right? And so when you're not face to face, and you have somebody who tries to control the conversation, or says things that are inappropriate, or raises topics that you're like, what the heck? That has a definite impact, because you. And I'm really excited about Arizona coming up. I'm so excited about that. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So there's a small group of us who are going to be meeting up in Arizona and doing some work together. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting pushed. I think I'm going to get pushed out of my comfort zone some, and I'm really excited about that. But in order to be able to do that, just like with anything, I mean, I talk a lot when I speak that the hardest part of any negotiation is the negotiation that happens between our ears, right? What we convince ourselves, what we tell ourselves is possible and what's not possible. That drives what we can do, and to be successful in doing business the way you've been doing it, without the kind of safety net of a legalized or of a formalized contract, because contracts can be informal and are still enforceable in a court of law, as any attorney listening will go, yes, that's correct. But in order to do that, you have to be able to have that negotiation between your ears, Kevin. You have to be really confident in what you're presenting to the market and what your expectations are, and you have to have that clarity around that in order to be able to get that in exchange or in return from your counterparts.
Yes, yeah, and we have. I've done my best to focus on people who are, giving, generous, lead with a helping hand people like we've been talking about. And, in all these years, again, in the training business that we ran, over that 13-year period, we did over 500 strategic partnerships. And
wow.
And in that time, I did make a couple errors in judgment, and I think I'm like this eternal optimistic person. I always see the good in other people, and until they show me otherwise, I always see the good. And I can think of one project in particular that happened a few years ago. As far as financially, it was extremely successful. And my partner was the one in control of the monies and didn't abide by our verbal agreement. And I didn't go chasing down any monies. I just reminded him of our agreement. And the sad thing about it, more than anything, was that here's this guy that I really liked. I had actually been to his home. I had met his wife. I had met his children. I thought, that he was he had this certain way of doing things that was in alignment with me. But when it came right down to it, I was wrong. And that cost me not only financially, it cost me, a pretty good amount financially, but it also cost me a relationship that I was looking forward to doing a lot more things together with. And, I think that is what hurt more than anything. And even to this day, I have never spoken about who that person was to anybody. Nobody but he and I know that even took place. I've shared the story and the experience, but have never badmouthed this person to anybody, and I never will, because it doesn't matter. He and I know, and I wish him the best. But by the same token, you know what? I would have wasted so much more time and energy and even money if I would have said, "Oh, I'm going to hire an attorney and I'm going to chase this money down because doggone it, that's owed to me. That was our agreement, and he didn't abide by that." And how much time and energy and money would that have sucked up? And I'm like, let's just move on. We'll learn from this experience. We'll just move on. And of course, all of our attorney friends were like, "See, I told you." I should have had a written agreement. But you know what? In my mind, even looking back on that, I don't know that a written agreement would have changed anything either. It might have given me some kind of legal leg, but I'm just like, what? For me, just move on. And I can count on one hand, out of all the strategic partnerships I've done, to do one hand of times that it was not a valuable experience. I'm like, those are pretty dang good odds. And even my close friends that say, "Kev, you should really get in a written agreement." I'm like, no, I'll just keep doing it the way that I have been, because the odds are still in my favor, and it's been going okay.
Yeah. So, was there anything in that relationship that you saw early on that you would have handled it differently earlier in the process, before you got to the point where he was absolutely not honoring what your verbal agreement was?
Yeah, looking back, I've heard from a few other people now that have had similar experiences. And so in that particular relationship, had I talked with those folks before, I would have got a gauge for that and probably been like, you know what? Yeah, I would have taken a pass. Hindsight is always 20/20, though, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and I think one of the things that when I'm teaching negotiation, one of the things we talk about a lot is about preparedness as you're going into the negotiation. And some of that has to do with being prepared with information about your counterpart. Because there's a lot that we can find out about our counterparts, whether it's, what they put on LinkedIn, or what they post on Facebook, or what others who are common in our circles know about somebody. I've had similar experiences where it's like, oh, well, that was interesting. That relationship did not play out the way that I expected to, because I didn't do my homework. I didn't do my due diligence on that person. And had I done my due diligence, I may have made a different decision. I also have not ever gone back and said, oh, that didn't, that I was owed something and I didn't get it. Therefore, I'm going to, take them to court or anything like that. And, it's always interesting because as a professional negotiator, people have certain assumptions about what I do and what I don't do and how I might be in certain situations. And I'm very similar to you in a lot of ways. It's like, for me, it's really about that relationship aspect. And yeah, I've gotten burned a few times, but the number of times that I've not gotten burned is better than the times that I have. And, I just kind of chalk it up to, karma will do what karma is going to do. And, I'm not going to waste my energy. And somebody said to me, and I actually posted this on Facebook not long ago, and I was surprised at some of the reaction I got when I said it, in terms of people feeling that it was very negative. And I said, and the quote was, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And, it's like, and a lot of women really resonated with it because kind of that's a way that I think maybe many women have dealt with kind of divorce or domestic violence, or like that moment then when you're not worried about what that partner may be doing or has done or anything, is kind of a freeing moment to say, I'm not emotionally invested anymore. But it also had, and so I have found for me, it's like, I wish them well. I'm not going to speak ill of them, but I'm not occupying my energy with that particular individual and just move on. And it versus having this, wrapping yourself around your head around an axle around, oh my gosh, I've got to sue them. I got to do this. I mean, that's emotionally draining. And it's just such a negative process. And for me, I just feel like it create all sorts of questions and doubts, and I'd rather just operate in what I know and what I'm confident in and let that part just kind of go by the wayside.
I've had friends, close friends, who have been through a recent big legal battle that lasted a couple of years. And in the end, they won that legal battle. But in the process, they spent so much money on it. It took up so much space in their minds and so much of their resources and their time and like even their family, it impacted their family. And I'm just like, you know what? If I can avoid that, I would much rather avoid all of that. Just let it go. Just let it go. And I know, you know what? I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert on all that kind of stuff. And I know, sometimes there's probably a need for it. But I mean, my personal take is if I can avoid a legal battle, then by all means, I'm going to do that.
Well, it's interesting because the United States as a culture, right, because I've negotiated all over the world, and it's fascinating to me what contracts look like at the United States versus what they look like in Asia or in Africa, or I mean just in other parts of the world. Like we're talking big chunks of the world, right? And it's just we try to contract everything, and it's not an effective way of managing a relationship. Because if you have like all these do's and don'ts and this and whereases and heretofores, then your ability to grow as a company or as an individual gets stymied by those do's and don'ts, by that box that you force the relationship into. And one of the things I admire about your way of doing business is that it allows for that breathing room. It allows for that flexibility of growth. And I mean, I just so people understand, I mean, I actually love contracts. I actually do enjoy reading them. They are nice time reading for me sometimes. And because they tell a story. The words in a contract tell a story. But what I get frustrated about is that when people enter into agreements and they don't understand what's in the contract, or the contract tries to almost, for lack of a better term, legislate behavior in a way that's inconsistent with how a business operates, and people don't pay attention to that, and and just things like that where they lose practicality, and it's like, what the heck does that language even mean? Why is it even there? So why do we even need it? And so having no contracts is an amazing way, or having informal contracts is an amazing way of it offers you the ultimate of flexibility.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think that our attorney friends don't think about, right? Because they're all about risk aversion and not about flexibility, because with flexibility is inherently that there's inherent risk. And so the less flexibility you have, the less risk you have as well. And so I think that juxtaposition is always fascinating for businesses. So.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about, and you've talked about it a couple of times. You've given a couple of examples as you've gone through. One with your first partnership with Joe. Certainly, we had it when we were talking about Tribe for Leaders. Is this concept around renegotiation? Tell us a little bit more about how you've seen that play out successfully in your partnerships over time, and what are some of the things that our listeners can adhere to in their own policies and procedures as they build their relationships, whether they're partnerships or relationships with customers and suppliers, around the issue of renegotiating?
Sure. Because like you said, when you go into a relationship with both parties knowing that it's an ongoing dialogue, it's an ongoing conversation, it's an ongoing relationship, and you just want the doors of communication to be open, they view it differently. And that it really is, it's not just a business relationship, it's also a personal relationship. I mean, I'm friends with the people that I do business with. I like doing business with them. I enjoy being around them. I go to their home for barbecues or whatever. It's like, those are the kind of people I want in my life, is people that I just enjoy spending time with. And and it's not this whole idea of it's just business. You know what? I mean, I don't believe that. And if I pick up my cell phone and I see somebody calling me, that if my heart like kind of just like, oh, that number. If I'm getting that, that's a sign something's wrong. I mean, I want to be excited to see whoever's calling me, whoever has my number. I want to be looking for, like, oh, it's John or it's Joe, or it's when Joe Polish calls me, I'm like, oh, cool, it's Joe. I mean, I don't get that feeling of like, oh shit, it's Joe, and like I want the relationships to be that way. And so, when we actually care about people, it's negotiations, I guess, and I've never, and I don't want to sound like I'm a negotiation expert, because I've never looked at myself. And in fact, when you reached out to me to do this interview, I'm like, wow, that's cool. Okay. So I never even looked at it that way, but it's that I care about people. That's what it is. And I think so much in business is missing that piece of it. That we that we work with clients that we don't love, that we don't care about the way, that it's just business, and I'm just doing my job, and I'm just I mean, I think, like, accountants are a good example. How many clients do they do business for that it's just doing the job? Yeah. And like, I would much rather have my work be an enjoyable experience, be surrounded by people that I like being around, that I look forward to having conversations with, that by gosh, if there's a way that I can help this person, I am all in. And it's just way more rewarding that way. And I tell you, when we are happier, when we get to just show up and be us, complete with all of our faults as well as with our gifts and our abilities, it's just way more rewarding that way. It's way more enjoyable. It's fun, and you know what? It can be really profitable too. So we can have it all.
Yeah, I tell people to stop doing business with bullies. Yeah. I'm like, just walk away, because there's plenty of business and there are plenty of nice people in the world to do business with. You do not need to do business with a bully. And if somebody's a bully in the negotiation early, they're going to be an even bigger bully once they've done a deal with you. And so if that's how they're going to behave at the beginning, just turn around and walk out that door, because no is the best answer and the most profitable answer you're going to be able to give in that situation. And one of the things that's interesting, we have a few more minutes here. One of the things that's interesting is that, so in conversations with people who are running large companies, they talk about fiduciary responsibility. And so they often, in a bigger company, don't have the luxury of picking who they do business with, because they have this fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. Their shareholders are often a lot more than just who they are, or people in that kind of their close circle. How have you done business very often with larger companies? And do you feel that the same approach applies when you're a small business trying to do business with a big corporation? Or does kind of the approach that you take work more easily when you're working small business to small business?
Yeah, I don't have any experience working with corporations. I don't have. It's always been, the smaller business. The businesses doing, what, 1 to 15, maybe 20 million. So that's been my experience. And what I've been told, because now I know people who have been in corporate, and it's a whole different ballgame for sure from what they've told me. That versus entrepreneurial small business are more nimble. They can turn quicker. They can make decisions quicker. All of that kind of stuff. So that's been my experience, and but. I've heard, that working with corporations is a whole different ballgame for sure.
Yeah, and the reason why I raised it, because I often say to people that, so I have this client that I just closed this deal with, that small retailer. They're about 1.25 million, couple million in revenue. Let's call it a couple million, but they have a $12 billion market cap landlord, right? And it's like, and trying to get them to do a deal was very challenging, because they have no invested interest in a company of my client's size. And so the reason why I asked you that question is because I see a lot of small businesses always wanting to play at the mega corporate. They want that marquee account. They want that vendor that everybody has because it's the best vendor, the best distributor. But just because it's the best customer for somebody else, or it's big, doesn't mean it's the best customer for you, or that it's the best supplier for you as a small business. And it strikes me that kind of the way that you do business, I think it does lend itself very easily with smaller businesses. But when you start going into that corporate world, things do change, because they do have a switch where that fiduciary aspect becomes more prevalent than the personal aspect. And they're making decisions on behalf of their shareholders, not necessarily who they like, but making that more of a monetary decision. And they can do both. It's just that the fiduciary aspect tends to trump the other part. No political statement meant in that word. So now that we're recording just a few days before the American election. But I also tell people, don't do business with companies that are significantly larger than you. Do business with a company that's maybe a couple levels above where you're at, because then you're more likely to be able to have this kind of relationship that you're talking about, that the ability where you can grow together, where there's more of a personal investment and you have a personal relationship, and you're building that personal relationship to help each other grow both as individuals, but as well as growing as companies. Yeah. And so that's just something that I wanted to raise, because I thought it was an important topic to bring up, because I know that there will be certain people who are listening going, I need that logo on my website. And, I think what you and I are both saying is that it's not that logo that's going to build your success. It's not that logo that's going to get you where you're trying to go. It's those relationships and that you've negotiated, and the word that you have, and you're staying to that word with those relationships, that's going to get you farther than having a big marquee logo on your website.
That's so interesting to you, because we just had a conversation earlier this week with somebody, and they were telling us how, I was trying to do research on you guys and trying to do research on Tribe for Leaders, and he said, I can hardly find anything out there on you guys. And I'm thinking, and I even commented to them, I said, well, that's kind of intentional, because this is something that we mass market or anything. And I was like, it's a really small community, and we're really intentional about who we invite in. And it's not something that we want just a whole, we're not going to build a big, marketing funnel, big marketing campaign, branding and all that. I have no intention to do that, no desire to do that. And I think, having the logo and all that, people can, you see this a lot, where especially with people who are getting published in like all these publications, that you'll see it like on their website with all that, Huffington Post or Forbes or As Seen in, all these places. And I suppose, that can create a certain sense of, what's the right word I'm looking for? Just like, okay, this person or this company, they've been around, they've been featured in these places, and maybe that can create a certain feeling. But I think giving people an experience, giving your clients an experience, letting them, and just letting them talk about you on their own, and a lot of companies want to get referrals. And they'll ask for referrals, or they'll say, hey, if you refer us, we'll give you whatever, we'll give you, financially compensate you or whatever. That's not what motivates people to refer. People refer because of the experience they're having. They refer because they're like, like Patty referred you because she was like, she had such a great experience. And she's like, Christine, you've got to come check this out. You got to talk with Kevin and Jules. And because like when people in Tribe for Leaders refer somebody else, it's because they're having a great experience. And they also know that each time a new right fit member joins the community, the value of being a member exponentially increases for everybody.
Yep.
It's in the member's best interest to not only refer, but to refer the right people.
Absolutely.
And it's really more of a nomination is what it's like. It's not a referral. It's kind of like, they're like telling their friends, you got to check this out. This is something that you really would get value from and you would really benefit from. And I think, I'd rather focus on creating that experience and just getting people talking about me, right, than having some big logo on my and plastering it on my website or wherever,
Yep. So how do people find you, Kevin?
Oh, we do have a website. I'm always hesitant to give it out, but it's at tribeforleaders.com. And I'll just, preface that with, like I mentioned early on, who this is really for. It's for established entrepreneurs, either, running $1 million businesses or more, who on the other side of the coin are just giving, generous, lead with a helping hand people of integrity. And, if you are, if you're about contribution first, helping first, leading with a helping hand, all of that, then by all means, go there and check it out. We're not looking for tons of new members. We're looking for just those few right fit members. And so, I'm like I said, I'm always hesitant to do some kind of a pitch for Tribe for Leaders because I don't want to get a bunch of people calling and scheduling calls that are just like, I want to get. It's like, I want to give. And, those are the right kind of people. Those are the right kind of people.
Yes. I know that I have not nominated, because I like that word a lot, very many people, because I'm very careful as I look across who's in the group already, who would be a good fit, all of the things that you just talked about. And I think that's an amazing thing because I think all of the members of Tribe for Leaders have that same mentality. So we're actually negotiating in our own heads, who do we think would add the most value and make the group just that much more amazing because it's already phenomenal. And so I see that happening with all of us as we look to just make the group just unbelievable. So it is definitely an all boats rises team of people who's really invested in each other's success. Yeah. It's an honor to be part of that group. So, and Kevin, it has been an absolute honor having you. Like I said when we started, I just have really admired your non-formalized contract approach to negotiation and the business that you've built and the success that you've created for yourself as well as others in your community and in your sphere of influence, and your openness to renegotiating and having that as part of your strategy just really impressed me. And I just know that a lot of small businesses don't use formalized contracts as they reach out to business, and some have done that with varying levels of success. And I just felt that having your message and the success that you've been able to build using that as a strategy is something that a lot of small business owners could benefit from hearing. So I really appreciate your taking time out of your very busy schedule to be here. Honored to be part of Tribe for Leaders and to be part of a team of people getting to work with you. So thank you very much for having me be part of Tribe for Leaders, and thank you for being a guest on In the Venn Zone.
Oh, well, it was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Christine. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. And next time, we will see you guys all on In the Venn Zone. We're really excited. We've got a lot of more great episodes coming up around the corner. See you guys soon. Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Venn Zone with Christine McKay. We invite you to visit our website at www.venn.zone to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Empower the negotiator in you and successfully level the playing field. Join us again next time here on In the Venn Zone.